Alright, hello all my pinball fans. Today I'm going to show you just a couple different ways that you can hook up the flipper kit that I sell. If you get the full kit with the power supply, then what you'll get in the box is this kit right here and this power supply. And most pinball machines are going to have, your flipper buttons, and then this we'll call the encoder. Okay, so you got some wires going to your encoder, and you can see right now if I hit this button, then the encoder over here is getting a signal. You can see that red light kind of coming up. Okay, so we need to somehow get this in between the button and the encoder. In most cases, the installation is really quite simple because most of the arcade buttons use these 2.8mm connections. And now inside my kit, I actually provide you with those connections on the kit itself. So all you really need to do is take the side where it says input. So if you look on the board, there's a label here. It says input. Input right there. And then there's another label on the back side that says button. So these two wires are going to go to the button, and these two wires are going to go to the encoder. And then on the other side is the solenoid connection, which should already be made for you, so there's nothing you have to do with that. And then the 12 volt in, which is going to go to the power supply. Now, since all I did was unplug the button from the encoder, I can plug it into the input. One thing to be aware of when you're doing this is polarity does matter when plugging it into my boards. So if it doesn't work initially, just flip the wires around. These ones that are going to the input, flip them around and see if it works then. Okay. But for now, we're just going to test it that way. And then I've got my button. I'm going to plug it into the two button wires that are there. Okay. Do that. And then the last thing I got to do is power this thing up. So I've got my power supply that it came with. I can plug it in. And then obviously you'll get two flipper boards with kits. In this case I just have one to show you. But plug that in. And now when I hit this button, you can see the solenoid's going off, and you can also see the computer's getting the signal of the button being pushed. So I've just now hooked it up, and I'm pretty much done at this point. So that's the simple scenario. In some cases, sometimes these wires here are soldered onto the button, or perhaps it's a different type of connection and you're not able to just unplug it and plug it in directly. And that's no problem. The only thing you have to do in that case is do some manual wiring. So what I recommend you do is just go ahead and cut the wires. Right in the middle is fine. And then you can just strip these wires back. Okay. Like so. So now I have the two wires coming off my button stripped back. And really, I can connect these to these connectors. If you want, you could strip these and put a butt connector in there. It really isn't that important because these are low voltage wires. You could even just kind of wrap the wire around there. So long, if you're going to wrap it around there, you probably want it to be a little longer than I'm doing here, but this is just to show that you can do that. You could wrap it with electrical tape afterwards. I've actually seen something kind of effective. This is just if you don't have the right tools. If you don't have butt connectors, if you don't have like a solder iron to solder them together, really just any way of getting physical contact on there will actually work, because like I said, they're low voltage and very low current wires. So the connection, so as long as it's secure enough, even putting those little insulators across it will work just fine. And you see, it's a great connection right there even. Now the issue is, over time, vibration and stuff may cause it to lose its connection. But because it's such low voltage, such low current, it's actually pretty unlikely that anything would cause that. But as I was saying, you could even put a zip tie around it. So if you have a zip tie laying around, you just take where that connection is, put a zip tie around there, tighten it really, really tight. It'll actually force that to be against there. Other people have used wire nuts. Wire nuts will work as well, but they do have to be lower gauge wire nuts because they're super thin wires. So to try and screw a wire nut on there might be quite difficult. So you see I got my button connected, and then the next one is just the other side where I got to hook the encoder up to the input. So once again, I'm going to strip these wires and connect it to the encoder. And again, this time I'll do it, maybe I'll strip them a little further back so you can see. Because the more wire you've got, the more you can wrap it around there. Once again, being careful on this side to get the right polarity on here. So I wrap it around there, and then wrap it around this one. And I would want to put some tape around it to make sure it's not going to touch anything else. But at that point now, when I click this, you'll see the red light. It's kind of hard to see, but the red light on the computer screen is indicating that it's getting the signal now too. So the one thing also to be aware of is sometimes you'll have buttons where they're being daisy chained. So there might be two wires going on one side of the button and then one wire on the other side of the button. So what you want to do is those two wires, you always want to connect all the wires to the input side, okay? And then on the button side, just run two individual wires just to the button itself. The input side have all the wires that were connected to the button. Just take those off and redirect them into the input side of my board. And then run separate wires going up to the button. That'll ensure that anything that's downstream from the board will be hooked up the same way it was. If you end up lifting that up onto this button side, that can cause some electrical problems in your cabinet. So you always want everything that was connected to the button before you put my boards in, make sure they're all in this input side after you're done, and have a completely separate, isolated connection from the button to the board. Okay, so this is what you really want to work on. This is the isolated part of the connection. So these wires here that are going to the button from the button side of the board should not be going anywhere else inside your cabinet. Okay, they're just going directly from this button input on the board to the button itself. This side, okay, this can go wherever. If you've got ground wires going into that before, you can still do that here, and it'll work just fine that way. Okay, so that's pretty much it. As you can see, electrically it can be pretty simple to connect this up, but I've had people get confused with different scenarios. Like I said, when they have multiple wires going to the button and they try and maybe put that up to the button side, it's not going to work that way. You got to make sure it's all going on the input. Okay, so hopefully that clears some things up if anyone is trying to install these things. Another thing to note is these screws that I add now, they're actually shorter than I used to add, so they'll work in even half-inch cabinets now without going through the other side, so you don't have to worry about that anymore. Okay, well, that's all that I have for today. Hopefully that helps when you're installing these things, and at least clears the air a little bit, gives you some different ideas. Thanks, everyone.